So good morning once again, dear students of class 11, and today we continue with the short story The Chinese Statue, written by Jeffrey Archer, and today will be the part 2 of the video. So in the last video that you saw, we had been discussing how Sir Alexander Heathcote reached China, and then he was touring around the countryside when he comes upon a poor hut. Actually, it's a Chinese craftsman's, you can say, workshop, where he finds a big collection of ivory statues which were made by the craftsmen, and then eventually he is shown a statue which is supposedly from the period of the Ming dynasty, and he is taken aback when he looks at the statue. The only flaw in the statue is that the statue does not have a pedestal or a base. Now let us see what exactly happens after that. So I'm scrolling up to that page, and you may also do the same in your textbook. So here we are. What was missing was the pedestal or the base of the statue, and a small stick protruded from the bottom of the imperial robes. Imperial, that is royal attire or the dress worn by the statue. So the statue was that of Emperor Kung, and he was dressed in the royal suit, and underneath the statue there was a small stick which was sticking out, because that is where the pedestal is attached to the statue. But in the eyes of Sir Alexander, nothing could detract from its overall beauty. Although the craftsman's lips did not move, his eyes glowed with the pleasure his guest evinced as he studied the ivory emperor. "You think the statue is good?" asked the craftsman through the interpreter. "It's magnificent," the minister replied. "Quite magnificent." "My own work is not worthy to stand by its side," added the craftsman humbly. So the craftsman is saying that he too is a craftsman and he also makes statues, but his statues are not that good in comparison to what happens to be his family treasure or heirloom, which he has now brought out and is now showing to Sir Alexander Heathcote. "No, no," said the minister, though in truth the little craftsman knew the great man was only being kind, for Sir Alexander was holding the ivory statue in a way that already showed the same love as the old man had for the piece. So the craftsman could make out that Sir Alexander was really impressed by the statue. The minister smiled down at the craftsman as he handed back the Emperor Kung, and then he uttered perhaps the only undiplomatic words he had ever spoken in 35 years of serving his queen and country. Why undiplomatic? We will come to that eventually. So these are the words he spoke. He says, "How I wish the piece was mine." Now this is where the turning point comes. Sir Alexander regretted voicing his thoughts immediately. He heard the Mandarin translate them because he knew only too well the old Chinese tradition that if an honored guest requests something, the giver will grow in the eyes of his fellow men by parting with it. So that is the custom, that was the custom in China in those times. According to Chinese etiquette or custom, if an honored guest shows his liking for something which is possessed by a Chinese man, the man should immediately give it to the person, the honored guest, as a gift to show his big heart, and at the same time he becomes someone special in the eyes of his fellow countrymen. So this is the custom. If you say you wish for something, then you get it in China, because the people will give you. But then there is a catch in that too. So we'll come to that eventually. A sad look came over the face of the little old craftsman as he handed back the figurine to the minister. No, no, I was only joking, said Sir Alexander quickly, trying to return the piece to its owner. You would dishonor my humble home if you did not take the emperor, Your Excellency, the old man said anxiously, and the Mandarin gravely nodded his agreement. Even the Mandarin is Chinese, so he agrees to whatever the craftsman is saying, because that is the custom in China. So if you don't accept when the gift is being given to you, then you are actually dishonoring the person who is trying to give you the gift. As per custom, if you like something, you get it as a gift and then you are supposed to accept it. So the minister remained silent for some time. I have dishonored my own home, sir, he replied, and looked towards the Mandarin, who remained inscrutable. So the minister was, feeling sorry that he had wished for this statue, because as a diplomat, as a foreign ambassador in China, he shouldn't have expressed his wish to possess something which belongs to a citizen of China. The little craftsman bowed. I must fix a base on the statue. Now we have finished with page 63. We are moving on to page 64. So the craftsman offers to fix a base, he said, or you will not be able to put the piece on view. He went to a corner of the room and opened a wooden packing chest. So he opens a wooden packing chest that must have housed 100 bases for his own statues. So there's a box full of, the pedestal of different types of statues. So he's searching for the right one in that box. Rummaging around, he picked out a base decorated with small dark figures that the minister did not care for, but which nevertheless made a perfect fit. The old man assured Sir Alexander that although he did not know the base's history, the piece bore the mark of a good craftsman. So he takes out a base finally and he says, I cannot tell you about the history of this base, but definitely this has been done by a great craftsman. So it's not something which he makes that he is trying to give Sir Alexander. He is trying to give something which is probably removed from another statue made by some other excellent craftsman. So that is what he's trying to say. The craftsman, the embarrassed minister took the gift and tried hopelessly to thank the little old man. The craftsman once again bowed low as Sir Alexander and the expressionless Mandarin left the little workshop. As the party travelled back to Peking, that is modern-day Beijing, the Mandarin observed the terrible state the minister was in and uncharacteristically spoke first. Your Excellency is no doubt aware, he said, of the old Chinese custom that when a stranger has been generous, you must return the kindness within the calendar year. So this is the catch I was talking about. That in China, if you like an object belonging to someone, and if you say how you wish you could have it, you will definitely get it from that person. But there is a catch to it. Once you get the gift, first of all, you cannot refuse it. Otherwise, you will be dishonoring the person who is trying to give you the gift. And secondly, you must give a return gift within 1 calendar year. That means within a span of 12 months from receiving the gift, you must also give a gift of somewhat equal value to that person who has given you his precious possession. So this was the custom then in China. So that is what the Mandarin is explaining to Sir Alexander Heathcote, that I suppose you know that within a calendar year you must give a gift to him. Sir Alexander smiled his thanks and thought carefully about the Mandarin's words. Once back in his official residence, he went immediately to the embassy's extensive library to see if he could discover a realistic value for the little masterpiece. Now, in those days, as I told you in the first video also, there was no Google, there was no internet. So it's 1871, remember. So all that one could possibly do to find out about an expensive piece of art was to go to a library and search for books which could give some information on that particular object. And in this case, Sir Alexander also did the same, because he had to find out the value of this statue. He had to somehow know how much the statue was worth, so that he could think about giving a gift of an equal value to the old craftsman, Chinese craftsman. So he went to the embassy's library, and he tried to find out more about the value of the little masterpiece. After much diligent research, he came across a drawing of a Ming statue that was almost an exact copy of the one now in his possession. So when he was searching, leafing through different journals, encyclopedias and other such books, related books, he finally came across the picture of a statue which was somewhat identical to the one which he had received from the old craftsman. So something similar, an exact copy. So, and with the help of the Mandarin, he was able to assess its true worth. Now, the book was written in Chinese, so naturally he needed the help of some translator. The same translator, or the Mandarin who always accompanied him, he helped to translate, and he could make out the true worth of the statue. A figure that came to almost 3 years emolument for a servant of the crown. So what was the value of this statue? What he learned from that book was that it was worth 3 years' salary which Sir Alexander got from the Queen. As a minister, as a foreign ambassador, whatever salary he got, if you calculate that on an annual basis, that is per annum basis, then it was worth 3 years' salary that he got. So now that's a huge amount. The minister discussed the problem with Lady Heathcote, and she left her husband in no doubt as to the course of action he must take. So what did he do? Sir Alexander Heathcote discussed this with his wife. And his wife was also with him. Probably both husband and wife were in China. So he asked his wife, and his wife agreed and said that, see, since he has given you such a valuable gift, you should also return the favor by giving him a gift of equal value. So he had a conversation. Now all good men generally, when they take a big decision, they generally consult their wives, and that's what Sir Alexander Heathcote also did. So the following week, the minister dispatched a letter by private messenger to his bankers, Coutts and Company in the Strand. Now, Coutts and Company is the name of a banking firm. Now, in those days, in 1871, nowhere in the world were banks nationalized. So different companies, ran banks, private ownership banks. And this was one such bank in which Sir Alexander Heathcote had some money. So where was it located? Of course, in London, in the Strand, London. So he wrote a letter. Actually, he wrote a letter, and the letter was a request letter requesting that they send a large part of his savings to reach him in Peking as quickly as possible. So he wrote to his bankers that please send me this amount, which was a big amount, from whatever he had saved in his account as quickly as possible to Peking. Now in those days there was no internet banking, and there were no ATM cards or debit cards or credit cards, things like that, MasterCard, Visa and things like that, sitting anywhere in the world you could just take out your money. It was not possible. So he wrote a letter, and the money would be dispatched in cash. There was no electronic transaction in those times, so naturally money would be dispatched in cash, and the money would take time to come. Remember, it took him 3 months all the way from London, from England to China. So he had asked for it, so as soon as possible. The more they delay, the more will it be late. So he told them to send the money as quickly as possible. When the funds arrived 9 weeks later, so 9 weeks, so that was the time taken for the money to arrive. Now, when the funds arrived 9 weeks later, the minister again approached. So we finish with page 64, move on to page 65. Approached the Mandarin, who listened to his questions and gave him the details he had asked for 7 days later. The Mandarin had discovered that the little craftsman, whose name was Yung Li, came from the old and trusted family of Yung Shao, who had for some 500 years been craftsmen. So he had quite a heritage. His family was the family of craftsmen, and they have been craftsmen for generations, for 500 years. So no wonder he had this Ming Dynasty statue of Emperor Kung in his possession. It must have been passed on from his forefathers to him in the course of these 500 years. So it was supposed to have been made sometime in the early 15th century. So naturally it is quite possible. So every way we see that things are clicking in, in the right place and fitting into the right place. So the Mandarin informs Sir Alexander about this craftsman's family background. Sir Alexander also learned that many of Young Li's ancestors had examples of their work in the palaces of the Manchu princes. So they were actually royal artists, royal craftsmen. His ancestors were craftsmen for royal palaces. So they made statues in those times for hundreds of years, and still those statues can be seen in some of the palaces of China. Yung Li himself was growing old and wished to retire to the hills above the village where his ancestors had always died. Now in China, there was this custom in those times that when a person would grow old, especially in backward China, in village or rural China, when a person would grow old, he would be sent to the hills, and there he would spend the rest of his remaining life by his sons and other family members. So this was the custom. So his son was ready to take over the workshop from him and continue the family tradition. The minister thanked the Mandarin for his diligence and had only one more request of him. The Mandarin listened sympathetically to the ambassador from England, that is Sir Alexander Heathcote, and returned to the palace to seek advice. So this is the request of Sir Alexander Heathcote. Through the Mandarin, Sir Alexander is approaching the Queen, the Empress of China, and he goes with his request and informs the Queen. A few days later, the Empress granted Sir Alexander's request. So a few days later, he got the permission of the Queen. Now what is he up to? That is a suspense we shall see by and by. Almost a year to the day, the minister, accompanied by the Mandarin, set out again from Peking. Now the story goes to the next stage. That is, what is the next stage? Now he is going on his way back to that craftsman's place almost a year later. Few days are left only in hand before he must give a return gift. So he is on his way back to that man's workshop. Almost a year to the day, the minister, accompanied by the Mandarin, they set out again from Peking for the village of Halichuan. Name of the village, you must remember, earlier also in the previous video we had mentioned this name. When Sir Alexander arrived, he immediately dismounted from his horse and entered the workshop that he remembered so well. The old man was seated at his bench, his flat hat slightly askew, slightly crooked. A piece of uncarved ivory held lovingly between his fingers. He looked up from his work and shuffled towards the minister, not recognizing his guest immediately until he could almost touch the foreign giant. Who is the foreign giant? Sir Alexander Heathcote. Remember, he was 6 feet 3.5 tall. Then he bowed low. So almost after a year, when he gets back to the craftsman, the man at first is not able to recognize him, comes very close to him, so close that he could almost touch Sir Alexander, and then suddenly his face glowed up because he had the recognition of who had come to his workshop. So then he bowed low, as in the Chinese custom, he bowed low. The minister spoke through the Mandarin. "I have returned, sir, within the calendar year to repay my debt." "There was no need, Your Excellency. My family is honored that the little statue lives in a great embassy, and may one day be admired by the people of your own land. So the man is only being generous and kind and polite that he says these words. The minister could think of no words to form an adequate reply and simply requested that the old man should accompany him on a short journey. So with that we come to the end of page 65, moving on to page 66. The craftsman agreed without question, and the three men set out on donkeys towards the north. They travelled for over 2 hours up a thin winding path into the hills behind the craftsman's workshop. So they're going up the hill. There is this hill overlooking this village of Halichuan. So they are now climbing the hill, and it took them nearly 2 hours along the narrow pathway that winds around the hill. And when they reached the village of Matian, they were met by another Mandarin who bowed low to the minister and requested Sir Alexander and the craftsman to continue their journey with him on foot. Now they cannot ride donkeys because now the pathway is even more steep and treacherous and very narrow. So probably that's the reason he says that now they have to follow him on foot. They walked in silence to the far side of the village and only stopped when they had reached a hollow in the hill from which there was a magnificent view of the valley all the way down to Halichuan. So down below from the hill one could see the village of Halichuan, and they reached this place. In the hollow stood a newly completed small white house of the most perfect proportions. Now this house is actually the gift, and this house has been built by Sir Alexander Heathcote with his money from the bank and with the permission of the Empress. And the house is worth exactly the amount that particular statue was worth. 2 stone lion dogs, okay, stone lion dogs which looked like lions. Okay, there is a particular breed which grows very big, and they have a mane and they look like a lion, but they are actually dogs. So such stone dogs with tongues hanging over their lips guarded the front entrance. So it was a beautifully built white little cottage with very beautiful decorations of stone like these lion dogs at the entrance. The little craftsman, who had not spoken since he had left his workshop, remained mystified by the purpose of the journey until the minister turned to him and offered a small inadequate gift and my feeble attempt to repay you in kind. So I'm not repaying you in cash, I'm repaying you in kind. And he is being humble when he's saying that a small gift. It's actually not a small gift, it's actually an expensive gift, and it's a beautifully built expensive cottage. But he has made it for this old man so that when he retires from his village, as per his custom, he can come and live in this white little cottage for the rest of his remaining life. The craftsman fell to his knees and begged forgiveness of the Mandarin, as he knew it was forbidden for an artisan to accept gifts from a foreigner. Now in China that was also a rule that one could not possibly accept gifts from any foreigner. The Mandarin raised the frightened blue figure from the ground, explaining to his countryman that the Empress herself had sanctioned the minister's request. So he told him that you don't need to worry. The Empress, the Queen, has herself given the permission. Therefore, this house has been built by these foreigners with the help of this foreigners' money, and you are getting it, so you can accept it. A smile of joy came over the face of the craftsman, and he slowly walked up to the doorway of the beautiful little house, unable to resist running his hand over the carved lion dogs. So he was so impressed. He touched those stone statues of the lion dogs. He felt them with his hand. The three travelers then spent over an hour admiring the little house before returning in silent mutual happiness back to the workshop in Halichuan. Why? Because it was not yet time for this old man to go and start living there, but he would soon be going within a few years more So this house was ready for him to live, and his condition would be better than the condition of other old people who are sent to live in the hills by their families without any place for shelter. The two men thus parted, honor satisfied. Which two men? The craftsman, the old Chinese craftsman, and Sir Alexander Heathcote. And they were satisfied, honor satisfied, and Sir Alexander rode to his embassy that night, content, satisfied that his actions had met with the approval of the Mandarin as well as Lady Heathcote. So he was happy that his wife as well as the Mandarin approved of whatever he did. The minister completed his tour of duty in Peking, and the Empress awarded him the Silver Star of China, and a grateful queen added the KCVO. These are all the badges of honor conferred upon Sir Alexander by the Empress of China because of his good work during his stay here. So his term of office in China is coming to an end. So as per custom, the Queen is awarding him with such you can say badges of honor. So to his already long list of decorations, after a few weeks back at the Foreign Office, clearing the China desk, we move on to page 67. Only the first two paragraphs of page 67 will be done, and then we'll continue again in the third video and finish the story. So after he came back from China, after a few weeks back at the Foreign Office, clearing the China desk, Sir Alexander retired to his native Yorkshire, the only English county means village, whose inhabitants still hope to be born and die in the same place, not unlike the Chinese. So Chinese people have this habit, no matter where they are settled in the world, when it is time for them to die, most of them prefer to return to China and die in their own motherland, in their own homeland. The same could be said for Sir Alexander. He was so attached to Yorkshire that he retires from service and he returns to his Yorkshire residence, where he now wants to spend the rest of his remaining life as a retired officer from the government. Sir Alexander spent his final years in the home of his late father with his wife and the little Ming emperor. The statue occupied the center of the mantelpiece. What is the mantelpiece? Mantelpiece is the shelf-like projection on top of a fireplace. So if you have seen a house with a real fireplace where wood is burnt to keep the house warm, there is this projecting portion of the fireplace which has a shelf-like top, and on that people generally keep decorative items, and this statue was kept right in the center of that mantelpiece. The statue occupied the center of the mantelpiece in the drawing room for all to see and admire. So whosoever came to his house could see the statue because it was kept in the drawing room on top of the mantelpiece, and people came and admired, and Sir Alexander Heathcote could proudly say that he had purchased this statue. Of course he had purchased, though he had received it as a gift, but he had paid for it. 3 years salary he had in fact invested for it, so he could proudly display and show and talk about it that he had got this statue, an original Ming dynasty artifact, when he was a foreign ambassador or a foreign envoy in China. So there we stop for today. So we have come to page 67 and we have just reached the top of the page, and we'll take up from there again in our next video. That is going to be the last video, and I'll be able to finish the story. So I hope I have been able to explain